This is my Onan 45 kW gasoline powered generator that I recently purchased and modified with a variable speed cooling fan system. The generator was in good shape when I purchased it, however, some of the maintenance items needed to be replaced. The coolant, the water pump, the thermostat, the hoses, they were all in pretty bad condition. There were no external leaks, but the coolant itself was essentially looked like muddy water. I went ahead and flushed the cooling system and installed fresh coolant, replaced the water pump, the hoses, the thermostat, just things to make the generator more reliable. Then I replaced the spark plug wires, the spark plugs. I replaced the points with a Pertronix igniter. It was a very easy installation. And lastly, I had to address the fuel filters. There was an add-on fuel filter that somebody had put on, which actually turns out was probably a really good idea because the gas tank had muddy colored gas in it. Not a lot, but a little. Even when diluted with multiple gallons of fresh gasoline and gasoline additives, it's still probably going to be several tanks before it's cleaned. So I'll need to change the external filter and keep replacing it until the gasoline is clean coming out. The fuel pump itself has a canister filter in it that was gone when I bought the generator, so I replaced it with the correct filter. Just things in general that I wanted to do to make the generator reliable so that it starts up and it runs every time. The generator was relatively quiet compared to the previous air cooled generator that I had, which was obnoxiously loud. Pretty much needed to wear earplugs near it. However, this generator's largest um, audible component seemed to be coming from the cooling fan. Rightly so, the factory went with the keep it simple methodology and connected the cooling fan directly to the crankshaft. The downside to that is that the cooling fan ran at engine RPM all the time that the generator is on. It moved a tremendous amount of air, but it moved that air regardless of the actual need to move that air based upon the cooling system need of the generator's engine. The generator head itself has a fan as well. It's much quieter than the engine fan, cooling fan running at full tilt. I had a spare VFD, spare 1 horse electric motor. I had some flat stock plate steel, and I had some square tubing, and obviously it had nuts and bolts. So I decided I would go ahead and try to put a variable speed cooling fan on this unit and see what happened. How much would it quiet down, and would it keep the system cool? I just completed the project. I have about an hour on the generator now since the changes have been completed. The generator is substantially quieter. Actually, running the fan even up to 50% of its typical speed, it's still fairly quiet. It's not actually very loud. It's only when you get past 50% and then again to about 75% and higher that the noise from the fan becomes pretty loud. It's loud enough that I was concerned it was going to irritate my neighbors, and I bought this generator to use to power my the bigger tools I have in my shop until some future time when I install a larger service there so that I can run them directly from the power company's power. I also installed a breaker panel, which in the video here is not completely installed, and then I used PVC conduit to couple them together with the generator head. Before, it looked like the generator maybe had been hooked directly to a building. There was no individual circuit breakers. There was just the main disconnect from the head itself, which is a 150 amp disconnect. The generator is reconfigurable. It's currently configured to run at 240 volts. single phase, or between phases 120 volt. Sorry, between the legs coming off the generator head 120 volts. I had an Invertec VFD for motor control, a 1 horse. I had a 1 horse motor, and I had a Honeywell temperature controller, and connected all of those together in order to provide a set point for the temperature that I wanted the radiator temperature to run at consistently. And so far it works pretty well. The generator, when it starts, it turns the VFD on. The VFD is set to run at 10 hertz minimum, so it does provide a small amount of airflow across the components in the cabinet itself. 10 hertz would be 1/6 the maximum speed of the fan. It's pretty quiet. It's actually very quiet running at that speed. You can feel the air coming through the radiator, but you don't really hear anything. The sound of the generator head and the engine are louder than the fan at that point. The generator coolant temperature gets up to about 192 degrees. I have the set point set to start to seriously ramp the fan speed. The generator on a 90-degree day with a light load on the electrical side, maybe 800 watts, so really light load running, was commanding the fan to run at about 30 hertz, which is still below the fan being really noisy. It isn't until the fan speed gets closer to 40 to 45 hertz that it really becomes loud, and then it becomes very loud at 60 hertz. It sounds like it's moving a tremendous amount of air at 60 hertz. To keep the radiator temperature at around 192 degrees required only 30 hertz. So this is with an ambient outside temperature of low to mid 90 degrees with the generator in the sun. In cooler weather or later at night, when the ambient temperature has gone down, it probably will not require as much from the fan to keep the unit cool. I also live in an area where we get a significant snowfall, and I would expect that in the winter time, when the ambient temperature has dropped into the 30s, maybe even into the 20s, the fan may rarely get above the minimum speed setting. So that's what I did. I have a little demo of the generator running. Unfortunately, you cannot really hear a before and an after because I didn't take a video of a before, but I can tell you that the generator is quiet enough now with the new configuration that I ran it for half an hour and called my neighbor, and he couldn't hear the generator running. He could hear it previously. So this was a huge win for me, is that I really primarily did this to prevent irritating my neighbors, to keep the generator as quiet as I could. Thanks, I hope you enjoy the video.
VFD is going to come on here in a second. VFD is going to run right now at, it's going pretty fast. I'm not sure what the temperature reading is. It's running, see the modulation is at 0 right now. It's below the set point. I have the throttle set at 5. And then you can see the VFD is running at 10.1 hertz. That's the minimum speed. And the fan is, the video is not capturing it quite right, but it's running at, you know, enough to like move some